During a high-level donors conference at Geneva yesterday, the United Nations has raised $1.2 billion for Yemen crisis. The UNICEF says that Yemen humanitarian crisis is aggravating. Amid reports of reaching out a peace deal between the Saudis and the Houthis, the rebel militia escalates in a dollar front. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Roshan Fuad. On Monday, the United Nations expressed its grave concern about a major funding shortfall to support the humanitarian response plan in Yemen during the current year. At the Geneva conference, world leaders pledged less than $1.2 billion for a humanitarian response that requires more than 3 times that amount. The following report has more details.
The United Nations has raised about $1.2 billion from donors out of its $4.3 billion aid plan for Yemen. Underfunding has seen agencies scale back Yemen's aid projects, including food rations, in the past couple of years. Last year, donors gave $2.2 billion, as shown by United Nations data. The U.S., Yemen's top donor, pledged more than $444 million for this year's humanitarian response, bringing its total contribution since the start of the Yemen's war to $5.4 billion.
At a time when many serious challenges call for our time and attention, the humanitarian crisis in Yemen remains an issue where our collective action has made and can continue to make a tremendous difference. Our funding, together with the relative calm created by the UN brokered truce, prevented 2.2 million Yemenis from falling into emergency levels of food insecurity.
The United Nations said in a statement that without sustained support for the aid operation in Yemen, lives of millions of Yemenis will hang in the balance. The war has killed tens of thousands of people, devastated infrastructure and the economy, and left 2/3 of the population, more than 21 million people, needing assistance. A truce initially agreed last April has delivered the longest stretch of relative calm and has largely held despite expiring in October last year, without agreement between the warring sides to extend it. The World Food Programme said over the past year the number of people living in famine-like conditions fell, but warned that the situation could be reversed, with reported that food insecurity is increasing. The World Food Programme, which feeds 13 million in Yemen and seeks 2.9 billion this year, says funding shortfalls have left most of its activities at reduced levels. Since June last year, 5 million people have been receiving half their daily needs, and 8 million have been getting a quarter.
The Norwegian Refugee Council confirmed that the results of the donors conference in Geneva are unacceptable. The Council affirmed that the donors conference in Geneva sent a negative image, stating that the world had abandoned Yemen at a critical time. It warned that the shameful lack of funding would have dire consequences for Yemenis. A number of international organizations have criticized the poor response by donors to the requirements of the humanitarian crisis in Yemen. 31 international non-governmental organizations operating in Yemen said, in a joint statement, expressed their deep concern about the expected consequences of a major funding shortfall in the humanitarian responses. The Yemeni Prime Minister discussed with the Secretary General of the United Nations the international efforts to bring peace to Yemen. The meeting also touched on discussing the partnership between the government and the United Nations to address the humanitarian situation. The Prime Minister stressed the necessity of integrating regional and international efforts and taking firm stances to pressure the Houthi terrorist group to stop its criminal practices against the Yemeni people. The International Organization for Migration launched a funding appeal for more than $180 million. It said this funding will be allocated to provide relief to about 4,500,000 internally displaced people, in addition to more than 200,000 immigrants in Yemen. Yemen remains one of the largest humanitarian crises in the world, with around 23.4 million people are in need of assistance, including almost 13 million children. The following report gives more details.
It's described as the poorest of the world's poor in an oil-blessed Middle East. Yemen continues to be categorized by the United Nations as one of the 46 least developed countries, depending heavily on economic and humanitarian aid while battling for survival. The United Nations once described the deaths and destructions in the 8-year-old civil war in Yemen as the world's worst humanitarian disaster. In a virtual conference in Geneva on February 27th, aimed at generating humanitarian aid, international donors pledged about $1.2 billion, falling far short of the United Nations estimated target of $4.3 billion. Currently, 17 million people are going hungry and at risk of becoming acutely malnutritioned. The international community also needs to urgently push the warring parties toward a negotiated peace. 8 years of war have destroyed Yemen's economy, creating ripples of misery for everyone. UNICEF said last year that more than 10,000 children have been killed or maimed since the escalation of the conflict. At the pledging event, which was co-hosted by the governments of Sweden and Switzerland, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said that 2022 ended with a measure of hope for the future of Yemen. He painted a grim picture of the current situation in Yemen, saying today more than 21 million people, 2 in 3 Yemeni children, women and men, need assistance and protection. He calls on all parties to the conflict to facilitate the safe, rapid and unembedded passage of humanitarian relief to all civilians in need, in line with obligations under international humanitarian law. He said humanitarians, including female Yemeni aid workers, must be able to carry out their work safely, independently, rapidly, and without hindrance or arbitrary restrictions. The struggle people endure every day is heartbreaking, and many Yemenis are likely to die unless the funds needed are donated.
Government forces repelled an attack launched by the terrorist Houthi militia north of El Jouf. Military sources said that the Houthi militia attacked the Abtar front and violent battles broke out with the government forces. It indicated that the artillery of the government forces targeted military vehicles that participated in the Houthi attack and destroyed them completely. In Al-Dala, the Houthi terrorist militia launched a number of attacks that targeted the government positions. More about this is in the following report.
At a time when the peace sponsors, represented by the UN and its special envoy to Yemen, are making significant efforts to achieve peace and reconciliation, the Houthi militia is pushing its forces towards the various fronts of Al-Dala. Personnel, heavy and medium weaponry, and mechanics were used as reinforcements. The Houthis also dug roads and trenches towards the fronts of Murais, as well as towards the areas between the districts of Al-Hasha and Al-Azaraq in Al-Dala. Military recon units of the 2nd Brigade, commandos on the Al-Dala front, and the rest of the combined forces maintained surveillance on these movements. These reinforcements, according to military sources, coincided with the arrival of top-tier Houthi commanders with Iranian expertise to initiate preemptive strikes that limit the progress of Al-Dala fronts towards major routes in the governorates of Ib and Taiz.
These movements have occurred across many fronts. The Houthis have mobilized their troops towards Murais, Al-Fakhir, Al-Hasha and Al-Zarraq. Their elements have increased in numbers, and they have fortified their capabilities. We await instructions and we are ready to thwart the Houthi threat.
8 years of perseverance have improved the soldiers' strength and steadfastness. The blood that flowed in the mountains and plains of Al-Dala inspired thousands to complete the liberation of territories controlled by the Houthi militia and purge the country of Houthi forces.
We are currently at Al-Dala northern fronts. As news comes, Houthis are continuing to mobilize their troops. However, the 2nd Brigade is ready to overtake them, and we stand vigilant. The Houthi forces present little threat to us, and we will liberate these sites.
Houthi militia fighters have escalated their mobilization attempts towards the Al-Dala fronts. Military forces have said that the Houthi willingness to undertake preventive strikes reflect their fear of losing the liberation battle, which will bring an end to their pilfering of the country's resources.
Coming next. A massive fire erupts in southern Hodeidah and devours a number of houses.
So they're giving you nutrition for him?
قالوا لي سلمي له ما عنده ديله تاتو بطاقه اسبوع يقولوا 15 ودحين تركه مدري يهبوا له مدري لا يا صعب علينا بعض الحين من حصلوا له حتى 10 ريال والله معانا قال له حقه من نشتري.
And what's the problem with his hands? What happened?
ياكلها بس نالوا لما يسيل دم.
Oh my gosh, it's red raw. Why is he eating his fingers?
ياكلها بنفسه كذا يمسكها وياكلها لما يسيل دم. بعد الحين مراها لقدي يسيل دم من هنا من سنانه حتى ينكع مضلعه. الحين ما احسه الحين معه ولا قال ما هاسوي. الحين ما راهن جاع هم ما بهن.
Welcome back. The Department of Geology at the College of Applied Sciences at Taiz University held a scientific symposium on earthquakes and seismic activity in the Arabian Peninsula and neighboring regions. A number of academics specialized in geology presented papers on causes of earthquakes and existing expectations in addition to the risks that earthquakes usually have behind.
هذه الندوة أتت نتيجة للي حدث من نشاطات زلزالية.
This meeting aims at discussing the aftermath of the earthquake that took place in Turkey, Syria and other Arab countries. We in Yemen are not far from the seismic activity. We aim at raising awareness on the earthquakes and how to deal with earthquakes if they took place in our country.
The report of the group of experts on Yemen for the period from January to December 2022 revealed huge amounts of money earned by the terrorist Houthi militia from a number of sectors. This report has more details.
The report of the group of experts on Yemen revealed huge sums reaped by the terrorist Houthi militia from the telecommunications and drug smuggling sectors, in addition to custom duties from oil derivatives and foodstuffs. The report indicated that the Houthis are collecting money from the black market for fuel in addition to their confiscation of bank deposits and finances from foreign sources. In the past few years, the Houthis have achieved significant financial resources by imposing zakah on new activities, which being estimated at 45 billion Yemeni riyal annually. The Houthis also imposed what they called a 1/5 tax on many economic activities, including minerals, oil, water, and fishing sectors. And the beneficiaries of the new tax are the Houthi families and their loyalists. The report of experts indicated that the rebels illegally set up land customs and checkpoints on land borders to collect fees on goods. It is stated that the investigation team received information stating that the Houthis were selectively imposing taxes, collecting illegal fees from several private hospitals and pharmacies as well.
Hodeidah, a fire has broken out and completely destroyed 2 houses in the city. The following report has more details about it.
When a humanitarian catastrophe strikes and you lose your shelter, there is no choice for you but to suffer. The citizen Abdullah Mashhour remains depressed in front of his fate, which led to the burning of his entire house in El Sayla area, north of the city of Hais.
A fire has erupted in our home, but thank God the children were out. The home was completely destroyed, including the furniture, clothes, and expensive stuff. None of the organizations have responded to us or even check out our condition.
The place where Abdullah and his young children used to live was burned, leaving only some stuff that turned into ashes. Abdullah's living conditions do not allow him to repair his room and replace what the fire has destroyed. Even the escalating fire affected a house adjacent to a displaced family from Jabal Ras district, and those affected by the fire suffered deprivation.
I was outside the home when the fire erupted. Some neighbors managed to put out the fire. It has destroyed some stuff in our home. We are 3 families who reside here in this home. I have been here for 2 years and I have never gotten any aid.
Displacement, suffering, and the calamity of fire, all of these are paid for by the helpless, whether the citizen or the displaced, who has no power. And amid all these tragedies, the concerned authorities and international organizations didn't inspect the condition of the 2 afflicted families or provide them with any food or shelter assistance that compensate them with the damage and alleviate their suffering.
Here is a reminder of the main headlines. During a high-level donors conference at Geneva yesterday, the United Nations has raised $1.2 billion for Yemeni crisis. The UNICEF says that Yemen's humanitarian crisis is aggravating. Amid reports of reaching out a peace deal between the Saudis and the Houthis, the rebel militia escalates in Al Ahsan. This is the end of the news. It was Roshan Fouad. See you soon.